packet. I think when I get the packet, this is what I digest, and then an email update comes in for the agenda. It's all well and fine, but I wish that we would adopt at the end of the document a REV, R-E-V, which would be the date and the time, so that we could just simply look at the end of that document and make sure that we had the right current agenda or document.
Excellent. That would mean that we would want to post that date and time somewhere in the corner. Annie, is that something you can accommodate easily?
Yes, I believe you're saying, Commissioner Woods, that you would like the title, the name of the document to include the date and time.
Yes, what I find is confusing that if I have the printed one that was delivered to me, and then I'm told that there's been a modification, and I print that one.
Then which is which and who is who? Got it.
Which is, and I get them on my desk all laid out here to be organized. I go, well, shoot, which now, and I have no indication when I look at those of which one. Now, excuse me, I try to stay organized, but the point is, in most documentations like this, there's usually a rev date, and in this case, I would suggest also a timestamp so that we knew when this new agenda came through or modification came through on the document.
I think we can all recognize the prudence of your recommendation. I don't think it needs any formal motion whatsoever. Let's consider it an internal moment of adding a detail. The timestamp is excellent. I think we probably all experienced a moment of that same thing in the process of replacing one with the other. So your comment is well received, and thank you, Neil.
Yes, I can
Thank you.
do that for the future agenda.
Okay, are there any other changes to the agenda before we approve it? Like to call for an approval of the agenda, please.
Second?
Is there any? Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Orlando, do you approve the agenda?
I approve.
Commissioner Phillips?
Aye.
Commissioner Woods?
Aye.
And Commissioner Perlman? Aye. Okay, agenda's approved. Now we can work with it as our formal document. Let's examine item 3, approval of minutes. Minutes were sent ahead for everyone to examine. Are there any comments, input, or modifications to the minutes from the regular scheduled, the special meeting scheduled on July 29th? Okay, if there are no modifications, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the minutes of the July 29th meeting.
I'll make the motion to approve
Thank you,
the,
Brenda. A second, please.
Second?
Thank you, Neil. All right, let's call for a vote then. Approving the minutes from the July 29th meeting of the Historic Resources Commission. Commissioner Orlando.
aye.
Commissioner Phillips.
Aye.
Commissioner Woods.
Aye.
And Commissioner Perlman, aye. Okay, we have approved the minutes. Let's move on to our next item 4. I'm sorry, any ex parte communications. I have something to reveal, but I'll give everyone else a chance first. Anybody have anything to share?
No.
Okay, I would like to tell you about a conversation I had, a telephone call I had. We as a commission received a note from Jennifer Ayala concerning the Madonna Grange. And in our last meeting, I was assigned to investigate the Madonna Grange for potential historic value and the possibilities of putting it on at least our watch list. To complete this project, I contacted several different people, including the Grange Association, and to find out that Madonna Grange is not of the California State Grange Program. The Madonna Grange is on the property of the fairgrounds, as it's considered to be part of the property of the Santa Cruz Fairgrounds. So I spoke, had a very excellent conversation with Jennifer Ayala, who is the citizen that brought this to our attention. And she was able to update me that the reason I had not received any return phone calls from Dave Kegabine, the general manager of the fairgrounds, is that Mr. Kegabine is resigning and completing his role as general manager of the fairgrounds. So we're between a rock and a hard spot right now, okay? And I think that if I spend a minute more, we won't have to revisit this issue later on, where I had it positioned into the agenda. So just to say so, we'll put it on hold for the moment. When the fairgrounds management is real and the person to talk to, I will pursue that or to the committee. On that?
Barry, you're cutting out.
Well, the system's cutting out. It's not me.
Okay. Noted.
Annie's moving some speakers and things around to see if it will give us a better transmission. And I'll keep talking so you can use my voice to determine. Is that any clearer to you? Is that more steady?
The clarity was fine. It was just cutting out.
Still cutting out.
No, it's not now. The clarity is fine.
Good, good. Natisha, can you keep your eye on that?
Yeah, and I'll just say it might be interference from other noises in the room. So just while someone else is talking, just try to keep other noises down. That might help.
Okay, thanks. It's been pretty quiet in here, so it may be something. We'll do our best. Neil, if you need me to repeat anything, please speak up, okay?
Thank you.
You bet. All right, friends. Any other ex parte communications? Grand. Public communications will invite members of the public to speak on items that are not on this agenda. If anyone has such, this would be a good time to raise your hand.
We have your name.
Okay, it appears we have no public communications items, so we will complete item 5 and move on to agenda item 6, which are consent items. Okay, for consent items, may I bring your attention, please, to let's deal with the draft meeting schedule as our first consent item. Oh, I'm sorry, that's 8A. I'm sorry, wrong. I stand corrected. I believe that we have here the resolution that we will operate under the Brown Act. And this needs to be renewed and has come up for its, I guess, annual renewal, maybe?
No, so this,
Could you clarify for us?
yes, so this is a resolution to continue virtual historic resources.
What we
meetings
do
under
monthly,
the Brown
yes.
Act. Yes,
Yes.
right, this has to be renewed every 30 days. So if you've been 30 days since you've adopted this resolution for a meeting, then you need to adopt it again. And I did look into this from the last meeting, and the commission does need to make a motion to adopt this resolution.
Yes.
It's on the consent agenda.
Okay, so is there any discussion?
May I ask for clarity? Annie, we have to do this every 30 days. Is that the way this works?
Well, if it's been longer than 30 days since you've adopted it at a meeting, then you need to do it again. So essentially for the commission, that means at each meeting you would be adopting it again.
Okay, as long as we have these hybrid meetings, we continue to adopt it.
Yeah,
Correct.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay,
When the hybrid goes away, this becomes an unnecessary item. And it will remain on our routine agendas until that time.
okay.
Does anybody have any comments on this? Then let's call for a vote, please. Oh, I guess, can somebody give me a motion to accept this document?
I move that we accept this resolution.
Can you Neil a second, please?
Second.
Thank you very much. Let's call for a vote. All in favor, Commissioner Orlando,
Aye.
Commissioner Phillips,
Aye.
Commissioner Woods,
Aye.
and Commissioner Perlman, aye. Okay, we have approved this for continuing for our current meeting and into the future. That's item 6. Thank you. Public hearing items. I believe we have nothing scheduled for today's agenda. Very good. That completes old business. I'm liking the pace you guys are helping me with today. Very good.
Breathtaking.
Yeah. If we are all mindful, I believe that we can improve our efficiency in our use of time in these meetings. And I appreciate the spirit of cooperation and support that I'm feeling from all the commissioners. So it's in our mutual interest. It's in the best interest of the county so that Annie can get back to her important work instead of this.
This is very good.
But thank you, everybody. Okay, on new business. Let's look at item 8A, which is the HRC meeting schedule for 2022. I would like to open the comments on this and present for the minutes an update that we have. Annie sent out with the future packet and posted on the website to conform to the Brown Act our suggested meeting schedule for 2023.
Excuse me, Natisha?
There's a,
Natisha, we have a slide for that schedule too, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay,
bringing that
I'll
up.
pull that up. And also, I hear
There's-
possibly some construction or something in the background.
I will mute my microphone
Okay.
until I speak, but I want to say one thing is there's a correction. This is for 2023, not 2022, as it shows there in the outline.
Thank you.
Oh, you're right, you're right. I'm sorry. Let's do a quick correction on the actual agenda. And thank you for that, catching that, Neil. On the sheet that was sent out, that's agenda item 8A in the upper right-hand corner, the HRC draft minute schedule. The actual item that you're looking at now is correct for 2023. We will make the correction to our minutes to conform to that. So what I'd like to present is the following. After this was mailed out, Annie cleverly stimulated us to all look at the schedule in anticipation of the meeting. And several commissioners have already announced that the meeting date of Monday, July 3rd presents a conflict. It does appear that for both members who had a conflict with July 3rd, it did appear that July 17th was an open and available day, and that July 10th, earlier proposed, was not. So with that information at hand, the first thing I would like to do is just ask the question, does anyone have any discussion on this before I present a suggested amendment to this document?
I just did want to note that Carolyn also emailed me and said the 17th works for her as well. So.
Thank you, Andy, for that detail. Alberta, does the 17th of July work for you?
I'm checking just a minute. 17th, that's a long way away.
It sure is.
Yeah.
And okay, now let me just check here. 17th of July seems to work for me.
Very good. At this point, I would like to suggest that someone present a motion to modify the schedule on the screen, agenda item 8A, and change the third line item that says Monday, July 3rd at 9:30 to read Monday, July 17th at 9:30. May I have such a motion?
Okay, I'm going to try to make a motion. I make a motion that we change the date from July 3rd to July 17th.
Thank you very much. A second, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Linda. Any further discussion?
And maybe the motion should say accept the proposed schedule, including the other dates.
Perfect. That's an amendment to the item. Everyone clear about it? May I call for a vote that does two things? It accepts a modification on line 3 and changes July 3rd to July 17th. And it accepts these 4 dates as our formal meeting dates for planning for the year 2023 for our currently scheduled 4 regular meetings. May I have such a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Linda. A second.
Second?
Thank you,
Second.
Neil. Thank you, Alberta. Let's call for a vote now. Commissioner Orlando,
Aye.
Commissioner Phillips,
Aye.
Commissioner Woods,
Aye.
Commissioner Pearlman, aye. Thank you, everyone. I think we can retire item 8A for the moment with a good resolution in future. I would like to make one passing comment at this time, and that is that we are spending agenda time calling for formal motions, seconds, and votes, because that's required for us to conform to the Brown Act and to operate this commission legally in the state of California. So if it appears redundant to any of our visitors or guests, please understand it is required protocol for us. And thank you for the efficiency everybody's working with on getting these items through. Let's move to item B. Discuss approaching the Board of Supervisors to request funding in next year's budget. That would be the budget for the year starting July 2023 and going to June 30th, 2024. So that's not the current year, nor is it next calendar year. What we're referring to is next fiscal year for the county, commencing on July 1st, 2023. Okay? Let's recognize that this year's budget is well completed and finished. And I would like to note that there is a great deal of depth that has been accomplished for the budget that we are referring to already. We're not way ahead of time on this. We're behind time. We're going to be creating some momentum with this proposal if it goes through, and that momentum will help us in the future for annual funding in a more timely way. But to launch it, we have to start somewhere. So we're looking at these dates and this calendar as the potential available, but let's recognize it may be too late for further changes. So continuing, to support the goals of the HRC, such as updating the historic resources inventory as discussed in our last meeting, and requesting reimbursement for miscellaneous operation expenses, including educational outreach. And we also had a brief discussion on that in our last meeting. Attached are the sample letters from the Commissioner on Environment requesting funding. So if everybody's had a opportunity to look at that, that was included, there's a letter that could be somewhat of a model for us. And I would propose that a technique to accomplish this agenda item would be first to discuss it and approve whether or not we wish to make this request. If we do wish to make this request, I would suggest that we establish a subcommittee of 2 commissioners who would work offline between now and our next quarterly meeting, which will be in January, for the purpose of constructing the letter and presenting it to the commission for approval and sending onward to the board. So I think that's the technique by which we would manifest this agenda item. Now I'd like to open it for some discussion from commissioners. Does this item need further explanation, or could we assume that since this reflects a discussion that had unanimous support, that the group is prepared to vote at this time? Anybody wish to address that for me?
I did have a few comments as well.
Oh, certainly, and thank you.
Okay, whenever you're ready for those.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I did check with our administrative analyst, Amy Wilbanks, regarding, there had been some discussion about a budget, specifically that the commission would have its own budget, and I did confirm that the county commissions do not have separate budgets, but that they, the funds that help support the work of the commission would be part of the department they're affiliated with. So in this case, that would be the Community Development and Infrastructure Department. So in a letter to the board, as you can see in the letters from the Commission on the Environment, you would be recommending that money be provided in the planning department budget for whatever, proposal you would want the board to consider supporting. So that's how you would craft the letter in terms of how to request money.
Thank you for that. That's an important explanation. And I would like to add to that, that this is not an isolated item. Let us recognize that we currently have a letter of recommendation that we have just sent to the Board of Supervisors about restructuring the commissions. In that restructure, it would in fact include trying to fund all commissions with a small cash fund for like expenses to ours. So we've been through this already, and that would be our intention. Now, the idea is that this would not take money, if we can get this done as we wish, this would not take money away from the planning department. This would be more funding that was provided by the supervisors, recognizing that they were going to fund something that would be for the commissions. So they would then hopefully up the budget of the planning commission by the amount for us and other commissions under the guidance of the planning commission. And likewise in other county departments. This is not to deplete their budgets. It's to keep their budgets stable and give us some extra dough. So would you agree that that's the concept that we're looking at?
Yes, right.
Okay, thank you. I hope I've just been clear. Does anybody have any questions about what we're discussing right now or any additional input?
It looks like Neil has had his hand up, and then
Thank
Linda just raised her hand as well.
Thank you. Neil, can I call on you, please?
Okay, my question would be, do we understand a dollar amount that we're looking for this?
Well, no, I believe that would come in the letter that would be crafted and would be putting that dollar amount on the table for discussion with the letter in our next meeting. How does that sound to you?
Understand, because I'm in the dark on what that dollar amount might be, correct? I mean, we haven't
Correct.
identified.
I have, in my own personal discussions, I should say not personal, in my own commission discussions with Supervisors McPherson and Supervisor Caput, I have proposed to them verbally, not representing the commission, but as a concept, I have proposed to them that they give between $2,000 and $2,500 to every one of the 41 commissions currently that exist, and then additional funding responding to individual requests. But I figured that would create around a $50,000 to $80,000 expense item, which in our multi-million-dollar budget is a tidbit. So, a couple $1,000s for each commission is kind of what was generally discussed. But I won't say any more about that because I would expect that recommendation to come from the subcommittee that crafts the letter and presents the proposed amount to us.
But just to finish up, according to Annie, and Annie, correct me if I'm wrong, this would be a structural change in terms of the funding mechanism as compared to how it is handled right now. Is that correct?
No, I would not say a structural change because it would still be part of the community development and infrastructure department. Currently, there are line items for training, so it might be, you know, if you were, example, proposing that the board provided funds for educational outreach and operational expenses, it would be a line item, you know, expenses related to historic preservation, educational and outreach, something like that. And it, you know, there probably could be some reference to the Historic Resources Commission as well, but the way the county structures these is commissions do not, departments have budgets, but commissions do not have separate budgets.
Understand, thank you.
So then I believe that what we're talking about is that the planning department would retain the current 2 line items for us in their normal budget. And then we would have an additional line item that might be available funding to us for other creative things that could come up or trainings that were expensive beyond the budget that was allocated within the planning department. So it's just a little more operating money to give us a little more room to move. Neil, does that satisfy your question?
Yes, I understand.
Thank you. Linda, can I call on you, please?
Oh, I believe you're muted, Linda.
Unmute, please.
Okay, there, unmuted,
There we go.
hand down. As to what you and Annie were just discussing, that is my impression too. What we would request under the planning department would be a third budget line item earmarked for the HRC, but that third one would have funding that we would oversee and vote on how to use toward the expenses, educational outreach, the history fair, et cetera, that we would have. And Annie, is there any other commissions? Well, I know there is one other commission, the Planning Commission. Are there other commissions under the Planning Department?
Yes, see, there's the Housing Advisory Commission. I don't believe that, as far as I know, that they've requested funds. The Agricultural Policy Advisory Commission, I don't believe they've requested funds. And then the Commission on the Environment, that I sent, you know, the letters are included in your packet. You know, and I'm actually not certain if there's some discussion to move them from the you know, the planning division of the Community Development and Infrastructure Department to the OR3 department. So I don't know if that's happened yet, but they have been under the planning department, and that's why I included those letters. But again, like the funds, the latest one, they were recommending funds in the OR3 department for certain activities. They were not requesting funds for work that they do. They were recommending, you know, based on the priorities in the operational plan, they were recommending adequate funding for that department to do its work. So,
are you staffed to any other commissions?
no.
Okay. And also, I don't know, maybe under commissioner informational items or maybe on the commission staff update, the talking a bit or informing the other commissioners about the CLG grant.
Yes, thank you.
The
Yes.
possibility of getting those funds And if we do not have a line item, what happens to those funds? And I'm not going to ask now to be discussed because we can do it further on, and because it's not an agenda item, but just to keep that in the back of our minds as this is what we're looking for. This is the kind of funding we're interested in, as well as getting something included within the planning budget. As far as the letter, I think absolutely we need to formally make this request in writing to establish the foundation, and then we can build on it going forward. So I'm very much in favor of doing this, with trying to keep in mind all these other pieces that we want to be sure are thought of and part of our strategy going forward in this topic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if I can offer, I'd be happy to help the subcommittee in terms of how maybe to recommend the language be drafted for the budget. And I can talk with our analysts too in terms of, how it should be worded. So I'm happy to do that before the next meeting.
Thank you, Annie. That will be significant because we want to put this letter in their language because we want to butter them up to say yes. Linda's comments were excellent, and I would like to share that Linda is well informed about this because she was my partner in meeting with Supervisor McPherson. And Linda can also be my fair witness. Supervisor McPherson was delighted that we were reaching out. And he said this reaching out represents a change that we are looking for. And he encouraged us to write letters to the board with the opinions of the commission. That helps the board pinpoint and understand better the functioning of the subdivisions underneath them. And he told us that he felt that his other supervisors would support empowering the commissions with a petty cash fund. So he basically told us to write the letter we're talking about. Would you agree with that, Linda?
Yes, I would. And I would just like to, in saying what you said, Barry and I met with Bruce because I won a lunch with him from an auction. So I would like to suggest that it was perfect. We had an hour together. We were in a neutral area, very comfortable and very amicable to having these kinds of discussions, no interruptions by staff or phone calls. So as a strategy, if you have a fundraiser, something that you want to support, you might suggest to your supervisor that they donate a lunch that you can then bid on and have that uninterrupted hour to discuss whatever you want. And to me, it was a win-win. So just a little plug.
Thank you, and thank you for the good advice. And it was it was really fun for the three of us to get together and find our deep common ground with one of our county supervisors. So thank you for that. Okay, at this point, I feel that we have had a pretty adequate discussion of this agenda item. So I believe that there is a pending motion that we need to assemble and formalize. The motion would be to form a subcommittee for the purpose of writing a letter of request for funding to the Board of Supervisors. In that letter, we would identify and name a proposed amount of money And this item would be an item that would be on our January 2023 agenda, so that we would be sending it to the supervisors, giving them 5 months advance on the new fiscal year budget.
Can I ask a clarification? Sure. So would this letter also be requesting funding for updating the historic resource inventory, or is that still to be determined?
I believe, Annie, that the answer is both, is that it can include that if the subcommittee crafts the letter that way. And why don't we include it now with Annie's suggestion into the motion? Why don't we include that we will be listing specifically funding for updating the inventory? So, from our commission, may I call for a motion that addresses this?
This is very long and complicated, and I would make a motion to go ahead with this, but I can't remember all of the words, so I'll make the motion without all the words.
That is the most brilliant motion I ever have heard. Okay, and Alberta, in the spirit of what you said, I agree with you. I can't even remember everything I just said. But let's craft it together, shall we? Okay, let's take Alberta's suggestion for the motion and let's establish, see if we can get a second on it and then vote on it. Once we've voted, I think we can detail for the subcommittee as needed the items that are included in this. Does that work? Do we have Alberta's motion that we form a subcommittee for the purpose of drafting a letter to the Board of Supervisors?
Are we naming a subcommittee in this now or after the motion?
I think after the motion, if we want, we're creating the subcommittee now, and then I'll ask for volunteers for it after we have it as a ad hoc subcommittee. So I think yeah, so the motion would be to create an ad hoc subcommittee of 2 commissioners. We cannot have 3 commissioners on a subcommittee. That breaks the Brown Act. So 2 commissioners would form a subcommittee. The purpose of that would be to draft a letter to the Board of Supervisors requesting additional funding for the budget of the fiscal year July 1, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. That funding would be for the purpose of a petty cash outlay, additional training, and funding for examining and updating our inventory of properties. There would be 3 items for which the funding would be targeted.
So can we say so moved on what you just stated?
Well, let's put it, yes, I think that Alberta just made that motion. I need a second.
So you were clarifying, so I'll second it then.
Perfect, Neil, thank you. Okay, and I don't think we need further discussion. We've pretty much exhausted this. So I'd like to call for a vote, please. Commissioner Orlando.
Aye.
Commissioner Phillips.
Call from 66931033083.
I'm not going to talk over that. I'm sorry. Okay, we've got 2 votes. Commissioner Woods,
Aye.
And Commissioner Perlman, aye. Okay, we have approved the motion to form the subcommittee for writing the funding letter. May I ask for volunteers to form this committee? Anybody interested in doing this? I will be one if you wish.
I am happy to assist in the word processing and editing and formatting it. I don't know that I have the skill set to come up with all the ideas, but I can work with the brain trust on this. But I'm happy to participate in that way.
Neil, you and I have achieved some good work together in preparing things, so to speak, offline. So I can write the first draft of the letter. And if I have you as a co-committee member, we can take it from my initial writing. I will lay it all out. And then with your help, you can help me with the accuracy, wording, and formatting.
And then Annie is going to look at it too for us, right, Annie, to make sure
Yes.
it's proper, your suggestions?
Yes,
Yes.
and yeah, I have some thoughts about it too, I think.
But Annie's participation does not break the Brown Act because she is staff. So essentially, she's the unnamed third member of the subcommittee. And the three of us will work together, maybe even the three of us get together either physically or virtually for a first discussion of it before I draft the letter.
Well, I'm happy to help unless Linda or Alberta want to take it on, but I'm happy to help in that aspect.
And how about the others? Linda, how about you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to say I would love to. Unfortunately, between now and the end of the year, I've got a very busy schedule, and I'm going to be out of town twice. So I really don't think I'd be able to put in the time to work on this. So Neil, I really, really appreciate your offer. Hopefully into next year, if we go in, going into a phase 2, I can participate more.
That's just great. Okay, and Alberta, if you're comfortable with Neil doing it, then you can relax on this one also.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Good, good. Well, thank you, everybody. This went quite quickly and efficiently. This could be a big deal for us in the future. We may be laying the groundwork for something that will be a really productive maturing for the commissions. So thank you, everybody, for that. Item 8B is now closed. And let's move to item 8C, which is discussing training opportunities. And I would like to start offering the floor to Annie with the help of Linda, who I think may have found this, not sure, but let's discuss training opportunities.
Thank you, Barry. Natisha, can you bring up the PowerPoint? I have a slide. So the California Preservation Foundation is offering a training called Historic Preservation Boot Camp, which seems very apropos to the commission's work. And there are 3 webinars. The first one is a 2-hour pre-recorded webinar on historic preservation ordinances, certified local governments, CEQA, and the Secretary of the Interior Standards. So those are all topics that are important to your work. And that one's pre-recorded, so it can be viewed at any time. Part 2 talks about finances, including the Mills Act, tax credits, and the California Historic Building Code. Also relevant, I know your commission has been discussing the Mills Act recently. This is scheduled for Thursday, November 3rd from 9 to noon. This will also be pre-recorded, so it could be viewed afterwards, although I would recommend, if your commission chooses to go forward with this training, I would recommend viewing it at the time it's offered so you can be more active when participating and be able to ask questions. And then the third session is on historic integrity. It talks about historic resource surveys and context statements, which is also very relevant to your work. And that is Thursday, November 10th from 9 to 1. Let's see, there is funding for this training. I believe it's $100 per person, something around that. So if your commission was interested in this, I could submit the request and get you all signed up. I do want to make sure that it's relevant to the commission and that your commission is able to participate in these webinars to make it a useful investment.
Thank you, Annie,
Uh,
and thank you for presenting this. Looks pretty interesting. Let's open it up to some discussion at this time. Comments from commissioners. Neil.
Alberta had her hand up. You can talk to her first.
Oh, okay. Alberta, you get to go first.
I just wanted to have Annie repeat when the first webinar is going to be. I didn't get that.
Okay, so the first one has been pre-recorded. So once we, if the commission does decide to go forward with this training, once we enroll in the training, then they would provide a link so that you can watch that webinar at any time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
To clarify, this may help. These are 3 live sessions. The first one, part 1, has already occurred, so we don't have the opportunity to attend and be interactive. However, it has been recorded, so we get to watch the first one as our warm-up. And if you wanted to participate on these dates of Thursday the 3rd, you could be live and interactive in the webinar. And if you cannot make it on November 3rd, it will also be recorded at that time, and you can watch it at a later time, but you will not be able to be participating. And that also goes the same for the third one. So I think these are, from the way they're described, they're right on target for us. And I'm very interested and encouraged by these, and thank you, Amy, for finding them. Anybody wish to ask any other questions or clarify or express any feelings about it? Neil, Linda also, well, Neil, yes, you're asking.
I'm very interested in doing this because as one of the newer members, it would be beneficial for me. So the funding, I would just need to know how I would, would we divide and conquer on this as a commission, each one of us taking one of these? Or would a commissioner avail themselves of all 3 to educate themselves? What's your thoughts on that?
I think Annie's suggestion in bringing it to us, and Annie, you have to clarify this, is that she buys the 3 seminars for all 5 commissioners, and that all of us really watch all of these seminars and participate in all of them. That would empower us with a lot more knowledge to operate in the future. It's of course a personal choice if you really want to watch the 3. That can't really be enforced, and it's not a job requirement. But I think Annie's intention is to spend $500 and buy 5 units of this, 1 unit for each of the 5 commissioners. Is that accurate, Annie?
Yes, I certainly, if we're purchasing them, I would certainly want the commissioners to watch them since, these are taxpayer funds. So if someone's not interested, please let me know. But I'm certainly planning to watch them as well. So I think the topics are really useful. Certainly if there's something that when you're watching them, a pre-recorded one, if there's information you already know, it's okay to skip through that. But I think there should be a lot of good information here.
Well, these are the subjects that we are working on, one after the other. So
my understanding, just for clarification, like for example, for me personally, I have a conflict on November 10, and I'd really like to see that one, but that's the live session, and then that would be recorded so I could dip back into that and review the seminar, not on that date, but at a next week for myself. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, I would just like to say that for me, and I think in order to serve the community better, I would, for me personally, would accept the responsibility of either on a live way or the recorded version, partake of these 3 excellent webinars. I think it'd be very good for me to do this.
I would agree. I would say those same words. It would be good for me to do this. Any comments from other commissioners? Can we call for a motion then, please? A motion for us to request Annie to enroll us in these 3 historic preservation boot camp webinars.
I move that we move forward with this training opportunity and request staff to coordinate the purchase of this for the commissioners to take advantage of this.
Thank you, Neil. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Alberta. Any discussion on the motion? I think we have a clear idea about it. Let's call for a vote, please. Commissioner Orlando,
aye.
Commissioner Phillips,
Aye.
Commissioner Woods,
Aye.
and Commissioner Perlman, aye. Very well, we have adopted this and we'll look forward, Annie, to your communicating with us by email, because we will not, this will be coming up before our next meeting, and offering us the threshold, shall we say, to access.
Yes, I would definitely, once have everyone enrolled, I will send that information out.
I don't know if ever again I will come up with a line as good as a threshold to access. So there you have it. But thank you, friends. Let's complete this item. Unless there are any other training opportunities to be brought up at this time. Linda, did you have one you wanted to talk about? You're muted, honey. Linda, you're muted. Did you have anything to add?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Very good. So I believe we have completed item 8C. And now we move into item 8D. In a moment, I will be presenting and recognizing Carl Bryce. The subject at hand, item 8D, is the reconstruction of the former box factory in Davenport, located on Old Coast Highway. Okay, Carl's been with us once before to present the initial idea of this, and he's here now for an update. And I'd like to recognize Carl Bryce. I think you're on camera. Natisha, is he on camera now? Okay, from where he's sitting?
Oh, once you come on up, Carl, you can have a seat.
So he's not on camera yet, but Annie, you can move the
We've got
camera
him
and
over
keep.
there with us.
And Natisha, can you also bring up the flash drive that I gave you?
Yes, what you'll have to, here it is right here. You'll have to tell me which slide, which image we should be looking at. There we go.
Thank you for, yeah, great. Okay, thank you, Carl.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to introduce myself for those of you who weren't here 16 months ago when I presented the last time. I'm Carl Bears. I'm a historic reconstruction expert in barns and historic buildings, and have gone through HABS training and built several HABS is Historic American Building Surveys, which is the equivalent by the American Institute of Architects for training architects and builders to use methods of forensic investigation to find, discover, and replicate parts of buildings in the manner that they were originally constructed. So I done a report. I don't know that I need to go through the whole thing. We can go to slide number 2. If we could do that, Tisha. Yeah, so this picture is a poor replication. Let's go to the next one because it's the same photo, essentially, a cleaned up version. You can see this is in the foreground center is the barn in question. And that's the original barn. And 3 years later, the next slide, there was a shed added to that. Which you can see in this picture. You can also see that the barn is basically at the end of Front Street, which is the old center of Davenport. And eventually, the Coast Highway is right almost where the barn is. The barn had to be moved 12 feet back closer to alignment with the other buildings on that road. And that was done in 1942. So let's go to the next slide. So here's the barn, the way it looked in 2002. This is a picture provided, I think, by I think Alberta, you gave me this picture. I'm not positive, but I can't remember who. But anyway, this is a picture that was.
I think so too. Yeah,
Yes.
looks familiar.
Yes. So anyway, this is the scene of that building, that the way it looked for many, many years. And it's the one that I started investigating when it looked like this. I actually went in and looked at the posts and beams so that I could think about supporting the roof system and not having it fall apart. Okay, so the next slide. So what I did was I took that original timber frame and I drew it up in a CAD program. And you can see on the right-hand side, there's an incline that the actual hillside has. So the outside of the building is a little different. But anyway, go to the next. These are the drawings that we would do for historic American building surveys. And each point, those dotted lines represent the exact center of the existing post lines that are still there. So we can reconstruct things that we don't see. Anyone have any questions so far? Because these are pretty detailed slides. They have lots of information in them. Okay, then I will continue. Some of the reconstruction of the building in 1942, I mentioned briefly that it was reconstructed when the highway came through. Some of the original parts of the 1890s buildings were either cast away or replaced by simply available items. So the lower part of the building, you can still see the old timber frame, the larger construction. And the top of the building was replaced by 2x4s stacked together, sandwiched together in different ways. This is pretty typical of the way that farmers with barns would replace or repair a missing unit. So there was no timbers around in 1942, so they used 2x4s. But I using the Habs formula, rebuilt the barn the way it would have been in 1890. So when we go to rebuild this barn, we will use the techniques that would have been used in 1890 rather than the 1942 replacement system. We talked about this at length. Do you have any questions about that? Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so this is the barn as it stood, and you can see that there's a floor there. Some of that lower level is actually underground because of the hillside, which I showed in the previous slide. So this is a section across the front of the barn that exists now, but part of it you can't see. Anyway, this is a clear projection with all the measurements. It's important for reproducing. Take the next slide. This is those red dots are the actual points where the posts are in the building in a survey that we did. The lower black line survey is the survey that was done by Bowman and Williams in 2017. So it's pretty close, but it varies a little bit, and it might be because the barn is leaning, and their survey allowed for that lean, and my survey is taken from the base of the post, which is more accurate to the way it was originally. The red dots are the ones that I did. Okay, next. So this is the framework that you would see on the side of the barn in the timber frame at the end of the building. And I think I'd like to stop here by saying that this all was presented to a historic review by, and we're calling it the Dudek review of the historic building, and they used these drawings in their 64-page report, which is available to all of you commissioners. It's quite a good report, and all of these things you can look at page by page, and some things are reviewed by them for historic accuracy. So what we are proposing to do is to take the original building and go through the forensics of this design, and then make some calculated changes to the design to make it more adaptable to a commercial use. And that's what we were hoping to get a commission support for. And that's why we've been working on this for almost 3 years now. What is critical for that building, and it's written very clearly on page 30, paragraph 2 of the report that is available to you, that the building cannot be moved or it loses CEQA kind of jurisdiction. In other words, if we move this to follow current setbacks set by the county, then the building will not receive the historic approval. So this was described on site with the county officials, and so we're looking forward to building the building where it sits now with the restoration techniques and methods that would be used for a historic California barn. I think that's pretty much all I have to say, because before the meeting, Annie expressed to me that your commission doesn't have zoning oversight and can't really speak to setbacks, which are critical for the rebuilding of this barn. I think there should be some questions. I want to give a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, and if I could just make a few comments too, because I meant to give you an introduction. So this will be coming to the commission once it's been reconstructed for review. There'll be the report that you mentioned. I can also send the report out to you, commission, now if you wanted to look at it, but it will be coming to your commission with a new DPR form, which would review it for consistency with the Secretary of the Interior standards for reconstruction. And they would be proposing that the building be added to the inventory. So that'll be coming to commission, but it can't really come until that time because there's nothing to add to the inventory where there's no actual building in place now. And I can certainly, work with zoning staff in terms of setback issues. I don't know where that's at this time, but certainly make sure that the zoning staff is aware of the constraints in terms of historic. So.
Thank you. Annie, I would suggest probably holding back on an immediate sending of the package and include it when we're coming in closer to having this item back on our agenda.
Certainly.
Just for simplicity's sake. Okay, and Carl, the first thing I'd like to say is thank you very much for a very clear and concise presentation that clearly represents a huge amount of research and work on the part of you and a whole team of people. And we recognize that. And I think we are very fortunate as a commission to have intelligent presentations that are well thought out like this brought to us. It becomes so much more tangible and so much easier as a discussion item. And what we're dealing with here, all the emotionality is taken out of it, and we're dealing with the logic and positivity of what you've accomplished. So I'd like to thank you so far and encourage you to continue. Now, any other questions we can field? Neil, you have your hand up, and we'll take any other questions on this. This is an important subject. We won't be revisiting it till it comes back on our agenda after some of their work, more work is done. So Neil, how can I,
Well, I always, appreciate people like this that take these things on and have a desire to, to maintain our connection with the past. Certainly in going forward, the historic significance of this will definitely outweigh what may be perceived as required setbacks and things, because obviously based upon how this building sits right now, it really has to stay where it is. Am I understanding, just for clarity, when I drive by, this is the building that the roof is essentially all fallen in at this point?
Yes, the picture that I showed you was just before the beginning of the collapse, and over the last 17 years since that picture was taken, most of the roof has disappeared.
Okay, yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you, and what a charming opportunity for Davenport, and how fortunate to have people like yourself that are interested in this. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to also thank Alberta for so many hours of discussion and description and help with me personally to get me up to speed on how the building was used in its various iterations, and also point me in the direction of talking to several other individual historians that had collected memories of the original building and how it was used. And that's why we're calling it the cooperage, because originally all of the lime was shipped out of the county in barrels. This is, of course, before paper sacks for cement, etc. So that was very helpful. And the barrels were constructed in the lower half of where it says existing retaining wall. Down below, the barrels were created and then lifted up through a center aisle or an open space. And then the hoops were put on, and the tops were put on, and they were filled with lime, and then put on wagons and brought right across the road to the railroad, loaded on the railroad. And the railroad cars, they didn't have those big silo cars. They had flat cars with these barrels on it all the way through the invention of the silo car in 1953. That was interesting to me, all this history of how that barn was central to the economy of Davenport in its earliest stages.
thank you very much. I'd like to add one small detail. Carl referred to the cooperage and to the barrels. Let's recognize that those barrels came from immediately locally felled redwood trees. Okay, there are layers and layers of history in this story. Okay, those old redwood tanks from many years ago, that is highly coveted wood these days, used in the construction of precious musical instruments that cost $50,000. No kidding. So there are layers and layers in this story, and they all reinforce our local history. In addition, we've recently had the wonderful publication of Alberta's history book on Davenport. We have the rebirth and relaunching of the Davenport Roadhouse. We have the Slow Coast Wine Bar coming in there. The bakery is now serving food. There's a new Mexican restaurant. Davenport is a happening place, and we would be remiss not to be strong supporters of this growing historic community. So at that point, I don't know whether any kind of a motion is appropriate here. I think that you could probably feel our sense of support. Carl, any other commissioners want to add any comments? Neil, you still have your hand up.
Annie, I did want to note that
Apologize.
there is an attendee, Marty DeMar. So I'm not sure if we're taking public comment, but there is an attendee. So we should at least note that if you raise your hand in the Teams meeting, that's how you would be called on, and we would unmute you if you wanted to speak. So
I'm not seeing any hands raised, Natisha.
yeah, I just wanted to let them know, Marty DeMar, if the attendee in the room, just to let them know that if they want to speak, they should raise their hand. So just wanted to make that, because I don't think we've announced that yet. So
Thanks, Natisha.
There's some city, anybody else want to see if anybody here wants to make comments sometime.
Correct. Did anybody here like to comment?
I'd like to comment. My name is Jean Murray. I'm the land use consultant. And
Yeah, or you can sit at the table, whatever's easier.
Thank you, welcome.
yes, and we just appreciate your commission for the support that we know that we're going to get from you when we come back after the structure is constructed. We felt pretty badly that we could not receive something in writing now to rebuild the structure in the same location. But as Annie explained, we have to have this done after the building is built.
And it's not, that's not our own protocol, that's the protocol we're conforming to.
That's exactly right. We realize that. But we're very delighted that you people your commission is in favor of this rebuilding of the barn, the historical barn. I lived up the North Coast and very familiar, have a place in Davenport and very familiar, this little barn. When I was a young girl, spent lots of time there with all one, and that's what we loved about Davenport.
Nice.
And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Commissioners, there's nothing formally we can do, but I wonder if we could get a sense. Linda, do you have any, you have your hand raised? Perfect. I'd love to have your input.
I just wanted to say to our guests, our presenters, how refreshing, and I think it warms my heart so much to see people willing to take the huge effort and expense to rebuild some of these historic structures when we have lost so many due to fires, through just just falling apart, neglect, and so on. So here, this cooperage up in Davenport, I know I've driven up there several times over the years and have seen the steady collapse of that building, and just, it's been a heartbreak. The Alba School that got burned in the CZU fire, and it's going to be rebuilt. And then we had that owner, I think earlier this year, that was doing some modifications to bring their home back into the way it used to look. So it just warms my heart, and I can't say how grateful I am that we have people in Santa Cruz County that are as committed and motivated to preserving our history as what we see coming before our commission. And a huge thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Alberta, I'll bet this delights you, huh?
Yes, it is. Now, I'm sitting
Okay.
here thinking, I don't care what you do, just get that barn built. So I'll
Thank you
be
very
so
much.
happy.
Okay, so our guests have now heard our individual attitudes towards it. So you can probably project at a collective opinion that we'll have where I can say it feels like the rest of my colleagues agree with me and are cheering you onward. We did have an opportunity with a property in the Harbor District on 8th Avenue to examine work that was done. And we were delighted to be able to fully support and fully approve it with no modifications at all. And that was largely because the folks had done so much work on it that they brought us a flawless project. I have a feeling yours may be flawless as well in its execution. So with that, I think you could get a spirit of encouragement. Certainly, would you like to come and say the camera?
I forgot, almost forgot, this coming November on the 20th, one of the largest projects of restoration in the county's history is open to the public for 2 hours. And that's the hay barn at UCSC, which I was lucky enough to have built in 2015. And you can see the type of restoration that we're considering is very similar in terms to that one, which also has the Habs and historic, it's in the historic line district at the university. And that's the direction that I take. That's the training that I've had leading into this. And so I just want to let you guys know that it's fully supported. And this is not just myself, but a larger building community wants this barn to happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for the presentations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, what a dandy few minutes in our morning, huh? And Letitia, thanks. I think we're done with those slides. And can return to our agenda. I think that there's no action to be taken. Does everyone feel comfortable with our level of closure on this? Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
We'll
you.
look forward to seeing you
Thank you.
again. Okay, let's close out item D under new business. And that closes out the category of new business. So let's try to effectively and efficiently move through our old business. After all,
May I suggest a 5-minute break?
that's a grand idea. Let's look at the clock now. I have, can we make that an 8-minute break and return at 11 o'clock?
That's perfect.
Great, let's take an 8-minute break, everyone. Return at 11 o'clock. I'll look forward to seeing you all.
Good, how about you?
Good,
Good.
good meeting.
Yeah, we'll just take a little break about the.
Annie,
Yes, hi Linda.
I just a quick question on the presentation we just saw. Has the owner said what they would use the building for once it was completed?
Yes, I mean, they want to use it as for commercial space. I think they were talking about like having, I don't know if it's settled yet, but like having, space for local vendors, sort of, visitor oriented uses, not an office, but like, things, like local crafts, or I don't remember. I think they have various ideas, but that sort of be the general ideas, commercial use and.
Okay.
Oriented, yeah.
Because I know they've had a water issue up there. And so I wasn't, sure how the county felt about new businesses, though, again, the Roadhouse, the new restaurant, bakery, et cetera, that certainly, has come into being.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that one of the things that a project has to have in order to be constructed is it's called a will serve letter from the water department. So I believe they are still issuing will serve letters, but that is something that basically they have to, before we can approve the permit, they have to have approval from the water district that they will be able to have water provided.
Well, I'm excited about this.
Yeah.
I think it will do quite a bit. And I was looking at the open studios, and I'm very well aware of Lundberg up there, but there were, excuse me, 3 other artists that were on the open studio tours up there.
Hang on one second.
And I just thought that's great. It just seems like more and more vitality is coming up into the Davenport area and bringing people north.
It's a very artistic group up there right now. They're not advertising, but they're there.
Oh, that's all right, not to worry.
Oh, I'm in remission.
Sorry to run out, Linda. I just want to.
Thank you
No,
for
this
having
is,
me. I was dawdling. Actually, I was chatting with our guests who had left the meeting, and they were very appreciative of our attitude towards them and the openness to their project. So, great. I would like to call our meeting back to order at 11:04. And we are on agenda item 9A, old business. If we all work together, we can get through this rather effectively, I think, in a short period of time. Let's begin item 9A, and I would like to call upon Linda to lead the discussion on the commission goals. Yeah, that's right.
okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So, under old business, my plan is to, as a first order of business, to go through any action items we have on goals to get them statused. And then on a following action item, to review any new goals that need to be evaluated and discussed. So that will be my strategy at each of our meetings until we've gone through all of our goals and have it down to just the ones that we are putting action items on. So the very first slide that you see is just to be a foundation point and to reacquaint everybody with what this whole piece of business is, and for any guests, so they understand what we're doing when we talk about the our goals. So I'm not going to go over that. So moving on to the next slide, to goal 3A.
I'm sorry, Linda, can I just make a comment on this goal?
Sure.
So yes, the action item was that staff was asked to bring the amendments to the commission before the end of this year. And I have been sort of pulled off working on that to devote my time in terms of ordinances to the sustainability update for the remainder of this year. We're shorthanded in our group. We had someone who moved and is no longer on our team. So I will be, we will be bringing the sustainability update to the board this year. So we're all working hard on that, and I expect to bring the ordinances to the commission probably in April of next year.
Okay.
Very good. That's goal 3A. And Linda, please feel free to move on to goal 3B if you wish. Or no, action item 1A.
So, so action item 1A and 1B, it sounds like, Annie, you do not have that both of these will be, you will report on them with the new amendments at our April 2023 meeting.
Yes, I expect to have the ordinances drafted for your commission to review in April.
Okay, so I will update that the spreadsheet for goal 3A. And so at the January meeting, I will not have this on the agenda to discuss. It'll be on the April agenda as an action item. So then moving on to goal 3B, which is preventing demolition by neglect. The action item was for a draft of a watch list template. And Annie, do we have that?
Yes. Natisha, can you bring up the next slide? It should, I believe I inserted that as a slide. So this was not included in your physical packet, but I did email this out to your commission separately. And so this is sort of a condensed version of the spreadsheet, but there would be rows under this header for basically the idea would be you would be evaluating a historic property from the exterior and noting the condition of the building for structures that you were viewing. And there would be space for the address and parcel number, the person doing the documentation with the date, notes regarding the condition of the structure, and then photos. The photos could also be provided on a separate sheet. And then I included a key just to kind of help the commissioners think about what sort of changes they would want to note for the structure. So one could be, that one of the structures you're viewing looks to be in very good condition. You don't notice any visible changes or maintenance or repair issues. And then when you're reviewing these, I would recommend that you view it, with the inventory sheet for that property. So you're aware of the condition that it was in when it was listed, so you could identify changes. And then the second, and of course, you can also note other things that I didn't capture here, but the idea was just to try and think about things that, you would want to note that may be related to the condition of the structure. The second would be things like modifications they've done, like exterior alterations or additions. And then what I'd suggest here is if you note something with that, I can coordinate with you to see if that is something that we have a permit for or not. Hopefully we do, but because there certainly are, a lot of structures, a lot of these properties were listed back in the 80s, so there's a lot of them have had work done that have hopefully been permitted work. The third category would be you are seeing visible maintenance or repair issues that might be peeling paint, broken windows or doors, damaged siding, structural elements that porch with damage or chimney, so those sorts of things. And then the fourth is sort of more severe deterioration that looks like it might affect the structural integrity, such as sagging roof, holes in walls, uncovered openings that are allowing water to enter, or deteriorated walls that appear to be listing. And then the fifth, which is structure been demolished, which hopefully, we're aware of those, but certainly that would be something to note if the structure has been demolished. So I'm hoping this will be helpful to your commission, just as a way to think about what to track when you're looking at these. And of course, the idea is that for this documentation that would support later approaching the board and the community with documented cases where structures are not being maintained, and there should be some sort of requirement that people are maintaining these structures so that we don't lose our historic resources that are so important to the community.
So clarification, this documentation template will be used on properties that are already on the inventory.
Yes, right. So we have that separate watch list, but this is under this goal of, I don't have the goals in front of me, but I believe this is about preventing demolition by neglect. So part of that is where, the commission would be looking at the condition of structures and documenting where there are maintenance or repair issues that are of concern that would help support the developing an ordinance to prevent demolition by neglect by requiring structure maintenance and repair.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions on this or the template? Neil?
I like this. I think this is great. And I'm just thinking in a practical way, since we have, let's take, for example, the Bayview Hotel, right? This would be a great template to hold up against the Bayview Hotel to keep an eye on that, so that is not going the way of demolition by neglect.
Yes, and yeah, the Bayview, we certainly are aware of the Bayview Hotel working on, but that would be a good example of, something where there are, concerns about maintenance and repair and that sort of thing.
I was just trying to find a good example we all knew about, but this would be, yeah, I mean, I think this is terrific. If we see something out there, this is what's on the known register right now, is that correct?
Right,
Yes.
this would be like buildings on the register, yes.
Okay, yeah, all right.
And I believe part of what your commission had tasked yourself with doing was reviewing a certain number of DPRs in your district. So that could be one thing is you could, the way you could use this would be to, when you're looking at these structures in your district, you could also document the condition of those structures, could be one way to use
That's an
this.
excellent suggestion, Annie.
Now, on the DPRs, I'm sure that's another discussion, but it would be nice for us to maybe discipline ourselves to formalize that somewhat. I see that as almost being an agenda item each time we meet, that each one of us has done X amount of reviews that we bring to the commission on a sort of a proactive basis.
Well, we're going to be discussing that in another couple of goals. That's goal
Correct.
number 13. So
Okay,
that is part of this agenda item.
okay, good.
What a like-minded group have we?
So, do we want to continue keeping this action item? Or do we want to consider this a closed action item? Since, we did get our watch list template. So we satisfied that action item. Or we can continue it and, use write up a few of these templates and see if they maybe need to be modified, or any other suggestions on how this goal is being implemented.
Well, I think it's ongoing because the goal B, the action item says track potential inventory.
Correct.
So we have the form now to help us. So that part of it has been met, but we certainly, I don't think we're tracking the potential inventory at this point, are we?
No, that's been one of the activities that we really have not formalized or done on any regularity, other than the obvious ones like the Redmond House.
It is
So do
in
I-
our-
So do I understand this, that as the, per the, how the supervisors that we serve, it's those historic structures in that district that we as a commissioner would be responsible for reviewing. So from a time management point, we have to know what that universe is and then figure out for the sign, figure out what it takes to achieve this goal, correct?
In one way, I think you're right. It's kind of ongoing because we all have other things happening in our lives, and our schedules change per person, and of course over the course of a year, how quickly we can move through our own individual inventories within our district. So what we can do is we can either, at this point, if we feel we need to have another action item, we can state and put that in with some kind of time structure, or we can just leave it open-ended for now until we feel that we need to have more specific activity in it.
I have a suggestion, Linda.
Certainly.
Okay, my suggestion would be, in the broadest sense, that we do continue with the item. More specifically, I would like to suggest that we put an agenda item on for our January meeting, which would be inventory by district. And make sure, maybe Annie can help us, so that each of the commissioners has a list of the inventory within their own district, a master list that is current and refreshed. And then we discuss the goal of taking on the task of eventually visiting or doing a drive-by in each property and a little update and filling out these forms. So I think there's enough there that makes it too big to handle spontaneously now. I suggest we make this an agenda, a specific agenda item to work on in January.
Okay, we certainly can do that. Every commissioner should have gotten an inventory list when they came on.
Yes.
And that's been one of the thorns in our side, so to speak, is that there has been no updates. So the inventory list has not changed, though we have updates ready to be implemented into the inventory once we have the funding and the time and people to do it. Yeah, and if you look at each of your DPRs, the majority of them, the last date they were looked at was in the late 90s. So we can certainly add that as an agenda item to kind of do an overview and just condense all this so everybody's on the same page as
Yes.
to that they do have all the information that they need.
Let's
In fairness,
call
I
that
think
item-
that, oh, I'm sorry, in fairness, I think Annie, you had forwarded to me for the first district, I think the inventory. So I do think I'm pretty sure I have that. I don't know how updated that is, but I guess I'll do my due diligence and look through that and get my head around what that number of properties is, right? I don't know how I divide and conquer on that. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm just thinking another way, you know, your commission could use these sheets is if you're aware of a structure in your district that's in poor condition, you could just choose, I'm gonna note this on this sheet. And it doesn't
Right,
have to be.
set the priority by the obvious problems and handle those first. Thank you, Andy, that's a
Yeah, that
really
could be
good
one way
suggestion.
to.
So I would suggest that what we call this for the January agenda, let's call this a review of current DPRs by district. And give it a little bit of time on our agenda and see how far we can go, assigning ourselves the task of an eventual inspection of all of our own district properties.
Because each district is going to have a different number of properties also.
And a different set of problems.
So, yes.
Right. I'd like to add that Commissioner Caput has told me personally that he would love to see us support the strongest possible version of an ordinance of demolition by neglect to use it the other way as a threat to property owners who are refusing to put efforts into their properties. Let them know how much it's going to cost them for them to pay for our requiring to demolish their property. And it's the other side of looking at demolition by neglect. But in fact, if they look at the cost of demolishing the Redmond house, they might decide to put that money into restoring it instead of demolishing it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We could talk about that strategy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that one.
I'm just suggesting that the supervisors are looking at the demolition of neglect ordinance from every different angle and welcome our input.
Yeah, generally a demolition of a historic structure, I mean, there are exceptions, like for the Seabreeze, because it was determined to be a danger to public health and safety, but otherwise, a demolition requires an environmental impact report. But I think even with that, I think it's probably cheaper, it would be cheaper to demolish the Redmond house certainly than reconstruct it. So yeah, it might be a double-edged sword in terms of that strategy.
And it might be, and some of these properties are an issue for everyone, including our supervisors. And believe it or not, they turn to us as the experts. Just think about that for a moment. Okay, well, Linda, I'm going to encourage you to continue with your managing this part of the meeting.
Okay, so then do we want to add the action item that at the January meeting on this goal of 3B, that there will be a further discussion on inventory by district?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And on the description of this goal, I am changing, I had put in here track potential inventory. I'm changing that to track potential neglect of inventory properties due to demolition by neglect activity.
Good.
I think that's a bit more clear on the description of what this goal is. And you'll see that in the January packet.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, so the next goal is goal number 5, the Mills Act. This was to research ways to implement a Mills Act. We had 2 action items. Number 1 was to request that staff provide a cost estimate of time to support the implementation of a Mills program. And Annie, did you have time to put together any close cost estimate? Or should that be deferred to a future meeting?
So let's see, I did do some research in terms of how other communities that have the Mills Act program address this. And so the cost to administer the Mills Act would include preparing and administering the contracts with each property owner enrolled in the Mills Act. And then there are typically annual inspections done of the property to make sure that they are meeting the requirements in their contract and including, you know, the rehabilitation or repair of the structure. So a couple that I looked at, the fees to cover those costs are included in the application fee. So in terms of, you know, those costs, I don't think the county would bear those costs. The main cost would be, you know, the tax that the county is receiving less property tax revenue. You know, the effect on the county would be having sufficient staff though to be able to do these inspections and administer the contract. So I think, you know, if there was direction from the board or, you know, interest from the board to moving forward with this, and I think what would need to happen would be a discussion between the CDI department and the board of supervisors regarding, you know, timing for implementing this program and making sure we have sufficient staff on hand to do this work. Because right now, I think given the general state of the economy as well as our department, we are understaffed and having a difficult time attracting new staff for some positions as well. So it's a bit challenging, but in terms of the actual cost of administering the program, those would probably be borne by the applicant.
Yes, I would agree with that. That's my sense for it as well. Okay.
So did Annie, I'm sorry, I was making notes of what you were saying. Did you come up with a number per property? A cost estimate per property?
No, I haven't done that. I did, let's see, did I don't think I meant to print that out. I did look at what another community had charged, and I can bring that to a future meeting. I think I forgot to print that out.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was probably a couple of $1,000 to $2,000, something like that.
Okay.
Let's defer that, Linda, and revisit that. Annie can give us an update on that. Also, when you make your January presentation, we'll include a moment for that item to be included.
Okay. Then action item number 2, the commission agreed to meet with respective supervisors to discuss implementing a Mills program, and any such meetings will be reported at commission meetings. This action item would seem to be an ongoing one.
Yes.
Okay. So then, is there anything else that we want to document about this program? Any other action item? Otherwise, we will return to it in January. Okay.
Very good.
Then the next goal is number 13, review of the Department of Parks and Recreation, the DPR form. And the action item was to review the forms to add information, missing information, correct inaccurate information, and when possible, provide an updated photo. And Annie has supplied us both filled out and blank DPR forms. So is there any questions about them, or how you would, what you what you would fill out?
And I have some information on that as well that I can
Okay,
share with you. So yes, what I included in your packet was, the Office of Historic Preservation, they prepared a manual, for, let's see, I believe it was titled Updating Historic Surveys, that you should have received in your packets. And I included the blank DPR form at the front of that packet. If you look at page 3 of the blank DPR form, it says at the top, Department of Parks and Recreation continuation sheet. So that can be used for updating information in a survey. Oh, you know what? Can you bring up the next slide? I did make a slide for that as well. Oh, where is it? Yeah, the next slide, one more. There it is. So this is what the top of that sheet looks like. And if you, this manual is long, it's very helpful. And, as you can see, there's a lot of information to understand and abbreviations for various things, but the continuation sheet, you can use that to record a correct update incorrect information in the form, or note changes to the condition of the structure. So this could be used rather than trying to prepare a whole new DPR form. It could be used to correct. See, if you see there, it says continuation or update. So this could be used to update information in the DPR form, and includes a space for the person doing the recording and the date. And we can certainly talk more detail about this later in terms of how to fill it out. But this would be like the appropriate form to use for making those corrections.
Are there any questions?
I was just going to mention too, in the DPRs that I sent you two, but the second one includes like an older version of the continuation sheet where they updated I think it just said like no changes this time, but that's sort of like they went out and looked at the property again.
Right.
And on the DPRs that you have of inventory properties, if you look, you will find the date of the last evaluation. So out of the 3 that Annie gave us, the first one, the date is 2001. And then and sometimes you have to hunt for it. The second one, 1995, and the third one is 1986. So this is why and it could be they have been updated, but they are evaluated again. Someone has looked at them, but the inventory has not been updated with that information.
Well, I was just going to say, if a consultant went out and looked at it as part of a survey update, we would have that in our inventory. So,
well, I'm talking about the commissioners and if they've turned in information.
right.
And one of the common changes will be change of ownership, especially ones that were last evaluated in the 1980s, 1990s.
Yes, certainly that would be, sometimes there are, yes. Mm-hmm.
So is there any other comments? Anything else that, what do we want to have for the next action on this goal?
The other thing I was just thinking is that, the webinar, the boot camp webinar series does talk about surveys, so, that may be useful as well to your commission.
So do we want to consider this goal as closed? Or do we want to just leave it open in case there is some activity? And after, say, another 2 or 3 meetings, if there's nothing that we feel needs to be done, we can close it.
I like that suggestion.
Okay. The next goal, in fact, deals with, no, it doesn't. But, well, our next goal is about the annual budget. And it was to determine if we had an annual budget earmarked for our commission, our discretion, our expenses. And Annie was very good in providing a clarification and a lot of information. So it seemed to me that at this point, there really wasn't any more movement on this specifically. We can certainly, since we're looking at asking for funding, we can make a new goal and close and archive this. Or we can maybe change the goal a little bit. What does the commission want to do with goal number 14?
I think we could retire it as stated. And we can always add a new budgetary or financial goal as we move forward. But it appears to me as though we had some questions, they were resolved, and we might be able to retire this item. What do you think, fellow commissioners?
It's interesting. So to complete a DPR form, the budget is $8,000 to $9,000 to do that. I mean, that seems incredible to me, but maybe that's my naivety, perhaps.
Yes, that was the estimate from the county's historic resources consultant, ARG. They are, I think, on the more expensive end but it's definitely several $1,000s to do each one. So it's yeah, to update a survey is a very expensive undertaking. In the past, we've had access to the, that's in these notes here, but well, I guess not. In the past, we've had access to the redevelopment agency funds, which were disbanded, by the governor many years ago. So we no longer have access to those funds. So updating the survey is a very expensive undertaking.
A lot of it's just the time of doing all the historical research, going through the records.
Yes.
And then looking at the house, the construction, and has there been any changes to it over time, and then comparing that to the Secretary of Interior standards, point by point by point. So it's, that's where the cost comes at per hour expenses.
Yeah, and I think when we had the training from Joe Michalak too, he kind of helped to show like how painstaking it is to do that research and go through those records. So yeah.
There are people though, I know that for the San Lorenzo Valley Museum, it resides in a church built in 1906. And so the board president, who kind of really gets into histories and does that as part of being the collections and exhibits, she put together the DPR form and got that church building put on the state and the national register, since it was already on the inventory. And of course, she does it in her spare time. But to do that, you need to have someone who does have the qualifications and knows what they're doing and just likes doing it. So for goal number 14, Annie and I talked a little bit about how we would do this. And we thought this goal would be a good one to use as our first example. So we have a archival goal spreadsheet. And I don't know, Annie, if you put that into a slide or so we could see what it looked like.
I'm sorry, I didn't put that in the packet or the slide.
It's a very simple spreadsheet of what the goal number is, what the title of it is, and how it was closed, and then a date of closing it, and then a date of archiving it. And Annie will keep that file there in her office, so that no matter who's changing on the board, the archive goals will be in one location and can easily be called up if there's any questions on if a goal was archived or not, how was it archived, what was the boundaries of that goal, what did it encompass. So for this one, we would close it out as receiving all the information to satisfy the goal, and it was closed on this date. And then Annie, what date would we put down for archiving? Would it be the date that you would have it within your possession and put it into your files?
Hey, beautiful, you've got a text message.
I would say probably today's date, if your commission, made a decision to archive it today, then I would think that would be the date that it was archived.
I would agree with that.
So is there any formal voting process on this to say it is now closed and archived? Does that need to go into any kind of record, or is this just a yeah, we all agree that this is now closed and archived?
Since this goal is not, it's a goal within a bigger package. So I think it can be handled informally. And I think that we can just acknowledge that we have satisfied our investigations and just quietly retire it without much of a formal action.
Okay, I will make that note on the template, so that going back, looking at this, it will show that the commission approved that this archive is goal is satisfied, closed, and archived on this date.
That sounds good, and it also sort of sets a precedent that will help us get through these in the future a bit more quickly.
Exactly.
So I think that's probably a good direction. So please continue with the rest of your report.
All right, well then we're moving into that completes action item 9A. So we're now going into action item 9B and continuing evaluating our goals.
Correct.
And I did not create slides for those, but I know your commission has these in your packet, so.
Okay, so so goal number 6 was to update and maintain an HRC website. And that website is on the county planning website. True, Annie?
Yes, so the there's not a separate website for the HRC, but the information. Yeah, there's a page for the Historic Resources Commission, and, that has the meeting dates and,
693-03084.
okay, so the information on the planning department or the CDI department, has information with HRC that includes the meeting dates, the function of the commission. Oh, thank you, Natisha. And so on the front page, what she just had out, that shows the next meeting date. That's what's posted when there's a meeting that will be coming within the next week or so. So that's under agendas hearings. And then the Historical Resources Commission information is under the sustainability planning section. Right, the Historic Resources Commission has information about the commission, the meeting schedule, access to prior recordings, my contact information. So that's what's available. And then there in the previous drop-down menu that Natisha was looking at, it also has other information there. About what can I do with my historic building and access to the context statement. So that's currently what's on the CDI webpage regarding historic resources.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Does that include a listing of the commissioners by district and any contact information for them?
No, but I have seen that for other commission, so we could certainly.
If that's possible for you to do, I reported that I recently talked with Jennifer Ayala, and one of the things she mentioned was that she was looking to talk with commissioners, and in absence of finding them, she effectively did go to Annie, and that was communicated back to us. But it would save folks a step. I think the appearance of being more accessible is an important statement.
And I guess that's a question for the commission too. I can certainly post your names. Does the commission feel comfortable with having your contact information posted there? So that
Good
was a
question.
question for the commission.
Could we ask each person individually? Could I start with Alberta? How do you feel about listing your contact information?
I'm not sure about that. I'm in a rest home. Oops. And I don't know what all that noise is. It must be from me. Okay, so I don't know about the telephone calls coming through. And at various times, like being in the doctor's office.
Sure.
Yeah, being at a meeting where you interfere with everything that's going on when the phone rings. So I'm not sure from my point of view. I have to give that some thought.
What about your email contact?
That's not a problem.
Okay, good. Then I suggest that we do it this way. We can solve this in about 2 minutes. Okay, I'd like to ask each commissioner about whether they would like their telephone number included or whether they would like their email included. And we do not have to be consistent. Each person can retain their chosen privacy. I would like to say that my telephone number and my email contact, I will include being chairman, and I may be the go-to person and take it off of you that any of you get intruded on. So I'm willing to include my own, but for the other commissioners, we could do it by individual choice and just give them something or nothing for each of you. So on that note, Neil, what about your telephone number? What about your email?
I guess there's no such thing as anonymity anymore, so I don't have a problem with it.
Okay, Linda, how about you?
Yeah, is that okay to both, Neil?
I'm sorry?
Is that okay to both your phone and email? Oh, I
Yes.
think you're- Okay.
Very good. And Linda, how about you?
I will say my email only.
Very good. And Alberta will use your email only.
Right.
And I will call Carolyn and I will share this update with her. And she can tell me her preference. And we'll communicate that to Annie. And we will add the information as individually selected by each of us. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, Linda, I defer back to you to continue.
So as you know, I went back to early 2017 when I identified these various goals that the commission had discussed over time. And the idea of the website was some place that people could go to, one, learn more about us, to have more of a public persona, and three, to provide more public information. And on there, you'll see that in 2020, there was discussion of brochures on a website. And we discussed creating a brochure that would have various information. And we weren't really specific, but, you know, information on what we were, what we did, that, you know, homes could be added to the inventory, and ways that California tax credits, et cetera, things to help people who had historic homes and didn't really know what the county could do for them. And also then you'll see discussed about the state rehabilitation tax credit, of which I'm not sure with this new state budget, but up until now, there's been no funding for it. So it's just there saying it's the ideas there, we want to do it, but there's no funding. And we have no control over that. That is through the state, but as more informational. So Annie, have you heard if there's been any funding approved in the new budget for this?
You know, I think it may be funded at this point. I can certainly check on that.
Okay.
And then I think
So,
probably, sorry to say, it probably would make sense if there would be to provide a link to that. But yeah, we could certainly talk about that at a future meeting, but I can report back. I think that it may be available now. And that would apply to structures that are, I believe it's either state or federally listed. So it'd have to be, it wouldn't just be for locally listed structures, but if they're state or federally listed, there would be fund tax credits available.
and that was the other thing, was that to get this state rehabilitation tax credit, the property had to be on the state inventory, not just local. So on the website, it would have that clarification. So people who did would know that they did have that source of tax credit. But I think at this point, we're kind of we're taking a step back, and this commission, since we have some new commissioners on it, we have a chance now to look and say, okay, here's what our website has now. what do we want to have on it and what are we able to have on it? And one of the challenges was to have somebody who would have the time to add and to make it more public informative for our commission than what it is now. So Annie, if we did want to have to add more information, for example, the county history fair that we were going to be at it to, to do some information on what the commission is doing and activities. Is there somebody who could be updating the website?
Yes, I mean, I think, it just occurred to me, this might be useful to have a subcommittee to look at the website and see maybe what, what additional information the commission may want to have on there, and I could work with someone. We are possibly, we had some interest from an intern for the planning department generally, but that may end up going forward. And we had talked about being able to use some of their time for historic related work as well. So that may be another possibility. But yeah, certainly we can make sort of add information that's on there to the website currently.
Okay, so there's an interesting idea floating here, and it was crossing my mind as Annie spoke it out, forming an ad hoc committee to review our web presence on the planning department site, report back to the commission, and why don't we keep it just that simple and then permit the commission to take further steps once they have the report? How does that sound to you guys? Okay, the proposal.
I think that sounds good.
Yeah, so why don't we form an ad hoc committee to review the Historic Resource Commission presence on the planning department website and report an overview back to the commission. And I'm going to suggest that this may be able to get accomplished by the January meeting, but why don't we set a goal of the April meeting?
And if I, sorry, there should be a motion to perform this.
Absolutely. I'm suggesting April because recognizing that in the fourth quarter, we have both Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it is our shortest quarter to be operational. Now, we do have a couple of weeks in January because the January meeting is later in the month. But maybe we should have a first report in January and a second update in April. I'm floating this idea, looking for a motion.
So what you're saying is that at the January meeting, there would be kind of a brief overview of this is what we're thinking. We met and get some feedback. And then at the April meeting would be a more firmed up picture of what the HRC website would look like, more detail to it.
Right. Well, I'm also, that's correct, Linda. I think that's correct. I'm also trying to be realistic in terms of the available time on a small commission, okay? With some people, we've all put in a lot of work, and I don't want anyone to feel overloaded, and I don't want anyone to be in conflict of which of their assignments they want to make, they need to make priority. So that's why I'm suggesting a little bit longer time window for this, because Neil and I already have one assignment. I can create a motion if one is not bubbling up from you. I create a motion that we form an ad hoc committee to review the Historic Resources Commission presence
Beautiful. You've got
on
a
the
text
planning
message.
department website and report back to the commission with an overview and with recommendations. I suggest the overview be presented in January and the recommendations be presented in April of 2023. So will someone please
Beautiful.
float
You've
that
got a text
motion?
message.
As chair, I can't present the motion.
Let's see. I will make that motion.
Thank you, Linda. And how about a second?
Second,
Second.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, all in favor of this motion? Let's go with Commissioner Orlando,
Yeah, aye.
Commissioner Phillips,
Aye.
Commissioner Woods,
aye.
Commissioner Pearlman, aye. Okay, we have a new motion, a new ad hoc committee. At this time, let's take a moment and staff that committee. Linda, would you be interested in doing that with me?
Sure.
Grant, why don't you and I make up that committee? We can get an overview and give a preliminary overview report. That shouldn't be very difficult to accomplish for January. And then we'll dig in the first quarter, you and I, and we'll come up with some suggestions for embellishments and present those next April. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Good. Then we have an ad hoc committee that doesn't need to be voted on. We have a motion approved. Thank you, everyone. Linda, please pick up on your continuing report from here.
I would just like to review. I have 4 action items for goal number 6. The first one is that on the HRC website, commissioners will be added by district with contact information listed. And I don't have a due date, but I'll just put down that Annie will report when it's done.
Good.
Action item number 2, that Annie will check on and report on the state tax credit, on if there's funding for it now or when it's expected to be funding available to offer the credits. And then action item 3 is the formation of an ad hoc subcommittee that we just discussed, with an overview report due at the January 2023 meeting, followed by a 4th action item of that ad hoc subcommittee making a recommendation report at the April 2023 meeting.
Good work. That's an excellent synopsis of the action items. Any commissioners have anything to add to this? Goal number 6 looks really good. We've made some really strong, good, simple progress. Please continue.
All right, so goal number 7 on my copy of the spreadsheet, the very top got cut off. So I just have starting from January 19. So I think this one was, again, part of the website, because I see that at the October 2020, it was for to mention about Alverda's Davenport book on the website. So again, it's looking at how we could offer more history information for people who are interested in the history of Santa Cruz County and the preservation. So again, I think it goes back to the previous goal.
I would
And-
agree. And it's been rolled into our action items on number 6. They're
So
comprehensive and cover number 7.
So I'm going to make that notation to on this goal that it's getting rolled over to number 6. So move to goal number 6. And so then we can consider goal number 7 closed.
Yes.
Okay, closed and archived as of this date. Okay. Number 8, this is along the same line. We discussed creating a video walking tour. And we talked about maybe partnering with some other either historical organizations or local historians to try and put something together. If you want, we can kind of table this till we get a better handle on I guess the boundaries or perimeters of what our commission wants to do and can reasonably do as far as engaging with the community and offering historic information.
Well-meaning on this, but I think a difficult task to try and achieve. I would just definitely table this for now. I mean, it's.
May I suggest that we table this and revisit this on this level of perusing it? Put this on the agenda for our April meeting? Does that
Okay.
seem reasonable? Does that seem reasonable?
Alberta
Yes.
has her hand up.
Yes, Alberta?
I just wanted to remark that while we were constructing the book on Davenport, my photographer and I discussed video stuff. And we do have some beginnings of that for North Coast area. So when you start working on this, call me and I'll give you the stuff that we've got, and it might be helpful.
That's great.
I think we have some things that are really nicely done.
Alberta, would you be interested and willing to share your resource of this video person? Because a conversation with.
I'll try to get a hold of him.
Yeah.
I'll try to get a hold of him and see what we can, if he's interested in doing a walking tour. He was at the time.
That's terrific. I would love to have a telephone conversation with this individual. If you could connect us, that would be delightful.
All right.
And if you would investigate, that would also be delightful.
Do you have a telephone number that I can call?
Yes, I do. Would you like it right now?
Yeah, I'll take it right down.
Okay, 831
831
227
227.
9220.
All right, repeat that last part.
9227. Not, oh, it's
227.
hold on, let me make sure. Now I don't know my own phone number. No, okay, 831-227-9220.
Okay, I think I got it.
I will also send you, I will send you an email
831.
also.
Very good.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Good, so, I don't know whether, I don't think we voted on the motion to table this. Have we done that yet? Could you refresh me, please?
I don't know. I don't think we need to make a motion to table this. I'm just putting it down as
Yeah,
the goal activity. It's tabled as of this meeting date and the action taken to revisit it at the April 2023 meeting.
thank you. That's excellent.
I would like to make a comment and specifically direct it to Annie. This is the planning department website, and we have a piece of it because we are a commission that is under the planning department, I guess, purview. And as a commission over the years, we've talked about trying to be a lot more engaged with the public, to be more visible as to who and we are and what we do, and have thought of all these different ways to try and do it because of our background dealing with, local history research, working with museums, having networking and friendships with local historians, that type of thing. But I don't know how much support in time of money and cost that the planning department is going to be able to earmark toward how much information we can put on the HRC website outside of commission business. So I think that's something that maybe we need to, for Barry, yours and my first website meeting, to discuss with Annie, to be a clear idea of, what our constraints are.
That's a good recommendation, and maybe we can ask Annie informally if she has any way of looking into that, checking with Stephanie Hansen or whatever would be appropriate. So when with the three of us are talking about it, in this window between this meeting and next meeting, we'll be able to, you and I will be grounded in reality. I think that's what you're looking for.
Yes.
Right. No 8x10 glossies of each of us. That's how it's going to be. All right. Thank you. Linda, do you have anything else to add to complete your report?
No, that's it. Just at the January meeting, then we'll be moving on. We did goals 6, 7, and 8. We'll look at 9, 10, and 11.
That's grand. And I'd like to thank you for the amazing amount of work and the continuity you're providing, meeting to meeting. I know that when you were chair, this was a vision you had that would be an improvement to our meetings, and I certainly think it is doing such. Very good, and my compliments to you on this. So we'll close item 9B. Now, the next item is number 9C. If you will kindly remember that we moved this item informally forward, and I covered the report for the Grange Hall and the fairgrounds, and we'll have an update as soon as there is a management replacement at the fairgrounds. So item C is completed. Neil, I've been talking a lot. Could I ask you if you would deliver the report on item D for us?
Well, frankly, I don't know. I don't have any information as, I mean, I assume this was submitted to the board of directors. Is that correct?
Yes, it has been sent to the board of directors.
And I don't have any feedback or I don't have any information on how it's received or where we are with this.
Okay, let me just add that I was setting you up without talking to you about it, and I apologize, and I won't do that to you again. What I want to name, what I want to name so that it goes on the record is that Neil and I were an ad hoc committee appointed at our last special meeting on July 29th. And our assignment was to refine the wording and mail out the approved letter to the Board of Supervisors. A copy has been included in your current package. The letter has been sent and received by the Board of Supervisors. That action item can now be retired, and we will be waiting for further work on recommendations and interface between the operation of the commissions and the plans for the supervisors. I think they may call upon us to help them next. That item has been completed.
I do have a comment on that as well.
Please.
So I did, the analyst from Supervisor friend reached out to me, Allison Violante, and she said that they actually do have a committee that was formed prior to your letter that is working on those issues. And she also said that they would be working on a letter to respond to you, and they appreciate you reaching out. So,
Yeah.
so that's kind of an update.
Yeah. Bruce told us that he had just the right place for our letter and our direction, that he knew who to hand it to and where it would go. So I'm presuming that we're dovetailing, Annie, on that is the committee that was set up by them.
Yes.
And in fact, that's why he wanted us to send it, to be able to show the other supervisors that there was interest from within the commissions. So I think it served everyone. Now, that completes item D and brings us to old business item 10, commissioner presentations and informal items. Do any of the other commissioners have any presentations or informal items at this time? I have a brief one I would like to share with you. We have referred to the survey named A Santa Cruz Like Me. That survey was issued to all commission members in the county in July of 2021. It was a joint effort by Community Ventures and the County of Santa Cruz. The supervisors had approved to co-venture it and to pay for the cost of the survey. It was managed through Stephanie Cabrera, who is the former clerk of the board. The survey was sent out. There was one discrete follow-up letter sent, and then the survey was published. Now that it is in the hands of the supervisors, the assignment has part two. Part two is to form the Santa Cruz Like Me committee to meet monthly for the next year, develop specific recommendations for the Board of Supervisors. So a letter was sent out inviting individuals to join the Santa Cruz Like Me, also known as ASCLM, which I'll try to call it from now on. There was an open invitation for folks to join that committee. Although I do not represent the profile that they seek for balance based on the survey, I was enthusiastic and I offered to join that committee, and I was selected to represent South County. So there's 9 of us on a committee that will be meeting monthly for a year. And this committee will be taking the work of the survey, evaluating it, and making specific recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. If at any time during the year, any of you have any business that you would like me to bring to the ASCLM committee, please call me or write me, and I will be glad to bring your ideas to them. If there's anything significant that comes up along the way, I will make a report at our following commission meeting. So there's my commissioner presentation. And if there's none others, we have finished with item 10 of old business. And now I will go to item 11 and defer to Annie for a Historic Resources Commission staff update.
Thank you, Barry. So Linda mentioned earlier regarding the grant available from the Office of Historic Preservation. And this is kind of unusual. They have $100,000 in funds remaining that they didn't receive as active grant applications, formal grant applications. So they will be passing that through without requiring an application proposal, just basically requesting that funding be received to all of these certified local governments that apply. And it has to be used, you know, for historic preservation, certain constraints on it, but it's generally fairly broad. So it could be used for things like trainings, classes, staff time. Can't be used for equipment, but so I did a little calculation. There are about 70 certified local governments. So if all of them apply, then that would be about $1,400 per certified local government. So so I will submit that application, and then perhaps at a future meeting, your commission could discuss how, you know, if you had ideas about how that funding could be used. That includes my presentation.
Thank you very much. And Annie, thank you in anticipation of filling out that form and following up with that application.
Yes, and thank you, Linda, for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate it.
I would like to say that I think that we are reflecting some pretty good teamwork here, interfacing with our staff administrator seems to be going very well, and we're all talking to one another, and we're knocking off our agendas and getting things done. So thank you, Annie, for item number 11. Item number 12.
Oh, it looks like Linda has her.
Oh, yes, Linda, I'm sorry.
So just a quick question, Annie, when is that money supposed to be, I guess, awarded? And two, if we do get the 1,400, how would that be handled within the planning department, since we only have two pots to put it in, training and historical consultants?
Let's see, you know, I don't know the answer to either one of those questions. I know the application is due October 14th. I'm not sure how quick a turnaround time would be to receive the funding. And then I'd have to check with our fiscal team here in terms of how it would be added to the budget.
Linda, I'm pretty sure that they're going to have an easy place to create a short-term line item, might be temporary, might be hidden under something else. But I'm sure the planning department can reserve those funds for us.
Yeah, and
Okay.
then there are processes for when you use any kind of funding, you have to submit receipts and various things. So there's paperwork that would need to be done depending on how this money is used, but I can certainly assist with that as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
And a good question too. Okay, now we're on item 12, written communications. Are there any written communications received by anyone on the commission?
I haven't received any for this meeting.
Excellent. Okay, now we have one last item left, which is a review of items for the future agenda. We have made some plans. Okay, so We have our standard agenda. We'll be adding to the January agenda. We will be adding a report on, we'll be seeing the final meeting schedule. We'll be getting several reports. Neil and I have our ad hoc commission, and we'll be reporting back on that. Linda and I have our ad hoc commission, and we'll be reporting back on that. Are there any other things anyone would like to add to the agenda for January?
I know we'll be continuing with the goal action items and then also discussing new goals 9 through 11. So that will be on the agenda.
Okay, then I think we have an overview of our agenda for our next item. There may be some development on pending items that are open right now, such as a report on the Madonna Grange and other things that will just be dependent on whatever progress is made. Anybody wish to recommend any other items to be added to the agenda for next meeting? All right, so that brings us to item number 13 or 14,
That's a typo.
depending on what you're looking at. I believe that I can call for an adjournment of the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I appreciate your commitment to the work. Our guests were excellent. Annie, thank you for your help. Natisha, thank you for yours.
Annie, Neil.
Yeah.
I would like that 64-page report on the barn for Davenport. I think that was taken up before I became a commissioner, because I don't have any recollection of ever looking at that or reviewing that. Would that be difficult to forward over?
Yeah, I can certainly do that.
Just a PDF or whatever is easiest, just that's fine. And no rush, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I did send them.
And I'd like a report on that too, if you can do it.
Yeah, sure. I can send that to you as well. I did send, I don't know if you noticed that, Neil, but I did send a link in the email I sent out to the agenda for that meeting where it first came, but that report is not part of that because it was done after that meeting, I believe.
Okay, I'll look at the link as well.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I'm happy to send the report.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And then, as I said, it will be coming back to your commission for review and approval, but certainly you're welcome to look at that report ahead of time.
Thank you, Barry, for a well-run meeting.
Thank you all. I appreciate the commitment of the commissioners and staff. And I would like to say everybody have a wonderful last quarter of the year. And the next time we meet will be a fresh new year. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Everybody.